Hey, Bo and Shannon. Thank you so much for joining me on an episode of the Scratch Golfers Mindset podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having us. This will be fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and excited to share and to be a part.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's hit the ground running. This flow state, this elusive, magical state where everything slows down and we can do exactly what we need to be doing to be the best husband or father or perform the best on the golf course. Help demystify the flow state. What is being in the zone? What is the flow state?
Well, first off, you have to ask, like, how often are you in flow state, right? And when does that happen? And you know, when you look at golf, golf is played over what, 4 hours, and then that's if you're walking, and then but then what is the actual time that you're actually playing golf? 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you really boil it all down to it, maybe at the most 10. Well, I mean, depends on, if you have a very, very, very high handicap, that might be longer, right? Right. But they say, when it comes to statistics and stuff like that, that we're only in the zone 1% of the time.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, we want to, let's focus on that 5 to 10 minutes. Who cares about the rest of the time? But let's really dial in on that, the 5 to 10 minutes that we're actually literally swinging the golf club or playing golf, so to speak. Bo, what you got, man?
Yeah, so I mean, when you dive into that term, flow state, right? That's the more scientific appropriate term for it. We call it in the zone, but science refers to it as flow state. And Mihaly, I'm not going to butcher his actual full name, but like Mihaly is the father of flow research, right? And then one of his, I guess you would say, mentees. Now I'm going to lose it. What was his name, Shannon? I'm losing it.
My mind's blank too.
Triggers.
Culture.
Steven Kotler.
Yeah. Steven Kotler. Yeah.
So Steven Kotler kind of like took it to another level, right? He talked about like, he believes that there are actual triggers that can get somebody into flow state. And so we kind of took that and ran with it. And we found that there is actually another custom trigger that can actually get somebody into flow state. And so that's where we came up with the term psychonomesco training. That's the heart of in the zone mental training and what we teach and what we use to help golfers get into that elusive state more often. We love to call it caveman golf. And the reason why we like to call it caveman golf, because the best golf, I mean, this is funny. I mean, we have a pretty large community. I'm on calls a lot. My team are on calls with a lot of golfers in our community. And, when I'll ask them, what's your lifetime low? And they'll say like, it's 71 or 68 or 79. And then I'll go and press a little bit further. I was like, okay, great. And when you shot that round, what were some of the things that you remembered about that round? And it is without fail, the common denominator for every single one of them is I didn't have swing thoughts. I was zeroed in on my target. It was like nothing bothered me. And they're all describing the traits of what it looks like to be in flow state, right? But more importantly, they're not playing their best rounds littered with a bunch of swing faults. And they're not playing their best rounds thinking about, the grip pressure and making sure your feet are pressed right. I mean, it's only on the target, and that's their main focus. And there's a lot of science and research studies out there that have proven that if someone can focus more on the target, they can get an object from point A to point B and get their body to line up accordingly and compensate in such a way that's going to give them the best chance and bring their true potential out that they have, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many studies like that are out there. But why we pioneered this term caveman golf is because we know when best golf comes out, it's when they get to a place where it's see target, see ball, hit ball. And psychonomesco training is what enables that more often.
I love that.
The thing is like, what happens is when he's talking about, we have to trust our athleticism and let our subconscious take over. And it comes down to, Dr. Izzy Justice, he's done numerous, actually over 12,000 brain scans. He's a neuroscientist of a golfer's mind. And one of the things that he found out was there's a lack of activity in the brain. Okay. There's not as much activity that's going on. And again, this is what Bo and I have literally focused on. All right, let's, getting those thoughts clear, how to clear your brain, but then also literally trust your athleticism and let it rip tater chip, so to speak.
Yeah, I love the way you guys break that down. Like, caveman golf, I had not yet come across that. So brilliant there. Now I'm curious, you alluded to it, Shannon. Like, I like to say we need to quiet our mind and learn to turn down the volume of our emotional brain or our swing thoughts. So before we get into some of those cues and triggers to get into the zone, what are some of the most common distractions or temptations that prevent golfers from getting into the zone and playing to their potential?
One thing is this: our brain, it's interesting. They have found out more and more, and even I'll go back to Dr. Izzy Justice because he did the brain scans.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain cannot process the word "don't." What are the first things that you think of when you see that bunker that's in front of the green or the water that you got to hit it over? That literally is going to test your limits as like how far can you hit the ball and stuff like that. Because what happens is this. I've done, like, I'll take somebody through a mental imagery little session to prove. And what I'll do is, all right, I'll have everybody, let's do this. Let's do some mental imagery of some bunny rabbits in a field, right? And then you start seeing that. You start having that mental imagery of all the bunny. All right, now let's increase the number. They're playing around. They're jumping around. This is fun, right? And then I'll say, don't picture a lion. And that's all I got to say. But this is how negative bias our brain is. Immediately when somebody is going through mental imagery of that, when I say don't picture a lion, it's interesting from what I've learned is most people find that the lion is chasing to eat the bunnies versus just sitting there playing around with them, because that's what the instinct is. That's what our brain is. But our brain cannot process the word don't. Because what happens is we're creating that extra target, right? Instead of like what Bo mentioned about being in maximum optimal level of flow state would be focusing on the target and your body's going to do what it does. But then when you say the word don't, there's two targets there. And again, it activates more brain activity, and we got to slow that down and to literally, again, play caveman golf like what Bo talked about.
I want to piggyback that because ultimately what's happening is indecision is creeping into the equation, and indecision will never allow a person to play to their best. And to kind of hit on that just a little bit more specifically, this would be something that I would write down if I were you. And those of you that are listening right now, this is so critical to understand to the core. Where your attention goes, energy flows. So when you're playing your best, your attention's on the target. And it's only on the target. And it's about how you're going to get your ball from point A to point B. But if you're sitting there and you see water on the right and you're catching yourself kind of trying to put your attention back on the target, but you just can't get the water out of your mind, well, guess what? Now you got two targets in your mind and your attention is more on the water. And isn't it interesting that you'll pretty much hit it either in the water or you'll hit a complete double cross and go way left, and maybe you're OB at that point. And unfortunately, this is the game and the battle that most golfers are facing right now.
Yeah, I love that. And, speaking from personal experiences, I'm sure everyone listening can relate to the moment we think water, we are nine times out of 10 going to end up near or in that water. And I love how you broke it down there. And I love, Shannon, like you bring the line into play. There's that negative bias, that protective survival instinct comes into play. And if you give your brain two targets, it's going to protect you. All of your focus is going to be on not doing the thing that doing the thing that you said not to do. Like,
Absolutely.
Awesome breakdown there. So now we know all of the temptation distraction. We know our subconscious doesn't process the word don't or no. How do we start cueing and triggering ourselves to get into the zone so we can have that laser-like focus where we need to be?
I think this would be a great opportunity for Shannon to kind of share how he accidentally discovered this.
Yeah. So what happened with me was my background is in speed skating. I was national champion, record holder, and but also before I got into speed skating, I played soccer. I played like semi-pro as well, and but I was like one of the fastest on the team in general. Depending on the team that I'm playing on, most of the time I was one of the fastest on the team. However, I noticed that, and just some background, the team that I skated for had over 22 national champions in their respective age group. Okay. So when I say going to practice, we had over 60 skaters. I was kind of like the skating against the who's who in the country, so to speak. You know what I mean? So they weren't slouchy or anything like that when I say this. My start coming off the line, I would get last off the start every single time. But then, like, if we're messing around and I got shoes on or stuff like that, and we're doing sprints just jokingly or whatever, I'm beating them hands down. So I knew that there was a disconnect there. Very similar in golf, there's a disconnect. Sometimes, you hear it all the time. I can't take what I'm doing on the range and take it to the course. It's the same thing. And so then that's when I started playing around with what we call psychoneuromuscular training, having a trigger, right? And then doing mental imagery, but then also adding an emotional state that's backed onto that. That actually, an emotional state that actually gives you a lot higher focus. And so that's what I was doing. I was doing my trigger and then what I call CPR, which we all know what CPR stands for, right? If somebody is dead, you want to bring them back to life, you do CPR. But I kind of changed the meaning of it, meaning consistent, passionate reaction. And so every single time I'm doing a trigger and I'm doing my mental imagery with all of my senses involved, as detailed as I can get it. But then on top of that, adding that emotion that I was talking about. But then a lot of times people don't reflect when they're doing mental imagery of their limb movement. What is their body actually doing during the swing? In my case, on my start, what is my body actually doing and feeling that and doing that? And so what happened was literally I got to where I could trigger my body to get in the zone on demand every single time that I stepped up to the starting line. And a lot of it is this. It's because I was getting my mental reps in away from, the race or, in golf, away from the course. We always hear 90% mental, 10% physical, or, it might be 75% mental, 25% physical. It may depend on the golfer or whoever's there. But my question is, okay, if it is 10 to 25% physical, why are we spending 100% of the time on 10 or 25% of the game? Right. And so I was getting my mental reps in a way, triggering my body. And I was literally, I'd feel my muscles twitching, and doing it and everything and making it become real. And then what's interesting was when I was sharing with Bo, when we met, all this system. Okay. Here's the interesting thing about system. System is an acronym. I love acronyms.
Yeah.
S stands for save yourself stress, time, effort, and money. Think about what that would do for your golf game. We have a system that is going to save yourself stress, time, effort, and money. We have put that together with the psychoneuromuscular training. And I developed this system and I was going through. Then literally within 1 month, I started beating people off the line. I was getting about, mid-pack. And then with about a month and a half, I was winning every start hands down. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. And I figured out it was Pavlov's dogs. We've all heard of Pavlov's dogs, classical conditioning. But when I was telling Bo all this, he was like, man, there's no way this works. But I proved it. I ended up becoming national champion because of my mindset and stuff like that, triggering my body to get in the zone. And that was just something I did. But so when I met Bo, he challenged me and I went back and looked at all the books that I was reading and I was doing it wrong the whole time. But you can't, it's like the outcome is amazing. What it took me to the other level. Right. So that's why Bo and I, we kind of laugh about it. I'm like, there's no way I'm doing it wrong, but yet I'm doing it so wrong that it's perfect and it's right.
So I'm going to help him finish part of that story because he's such an humble guy. He will actually share the after the fact of him becoming a national champion. So when we were at dinner, this first time he and I, we go out after meeting at church, and I'm getting to know him a little bit more. And this conversation just came out of left field because I had no idea that this was in his background as a speed skating performance coach, and so he was national team manager for the U.S. national inline speed skating team. And I asked him, I was like, so what was your record? And he said, I coached 142 national champions, 8 world champions, 2 Olympic medalists. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. What was your secret? What was your key to doing that? And that's when he said, well, if you really want to know, I was able to get my speed skaters to trick their bodies into the zone. And that's when I about fell out of the seat because I started laughing. And, to give me some context on my story, I walked away from the game of golf 2 years prior. I shut down my golf school. I was frustrated with my own game, but at the same time, the biggest reason why I walked away was because I would have people come to me, very few, but it was the ones that were really struggling with the mental side. And this one particular player was the final straw. And this guy, like on paper, we go out and be playing lessons, like he would be strokes gained, should be in the low to mid 70s. We're on the range working on his ball flight, hitting it as good as a 2 or 3 handicap. But yet, when he go play in tournaments, he would shoot high 80s, low 90s. And it literally frustrated me to no end. And it did the same for him. And then in September of 2016, I'll never forget it. We were having an honest conversation that evening. And we both agreed that we should part ways, and basically fired me that night, right? And that night, that's when I started putting out resumes, and I walked away and shut down my golf school. And this is kind of crazy when you look back at it in hindsight, because I couldn't help these few people, but I'm a type A type personality. I want to help every person that comes to me. And, generally as a whole, our school was averaging 4.7 shots dropped within 6 months across all of our students. And that's what I walked away from, because I couldn't help these select few people. Like, other people were like, that I couldn't help was like, why do I start on the front 9? I do really well, but I blow up on the back 9. And it's a tell of 2 9s. And it could be vice versa. They do terrible on the front and they go great on the back. Or it's like we talked about earlier about the water hole, right? Why is that I get to this one hole? It's my nemesis. And it's like, no matter what, I always hit it in the water 90% of the time. And if I don't hit it in the water, I'm so far left and I'm in trouble over here to the left side. And I couldn't help those people. And that's what I walked away from the game. And so when he and I met that night, 2 years later in 2018, and he's sharing all this with me, I was laughing because I was like, I don't believe you. And that's what I honestly said to him. And, I was intrigued just enough that I said, you know what? If this does work, I said, this will change the game of golf, because this is something that is drastically needed within the golf space. Because I told him, I said, look, I've read all the mental books out there. They all talk about flow state. They all talk about what the zone looks like, but nobody has ever shown a step-by-step path on how to get there more often. And you're telling me that you figured this out in speed skating, but I was like, I just don't think this is going to work for the game of golf. Golf is the hardest sport in the world. And so I said, you know what? I'm a perfect test candidate for this. I haven't touched a club in 2 years. I said, Shin, if this works, I will take everything you share for the next hour and a half, and I'm going to go try to apply this in my game. And so what I did, the second half of 2018, I played 8 rounds. I do this 0 physical practice between rounds. I do not hit warm-up balls. I go straight to the first tee, cold turkey, and I hit just a few putts. That's it. That was the path I did, in addition to everything that he showed me, right? So 6 out of 8 rounds, I go under par. The last 9-hole round I played in the end of October. I actually go 4 under and I lip out 3 additional putts for birdies. So it could have been even lower on that 9 holes. And that was also, we talked about this in the book, but that was after that round. I go home and I tell my wife we're opening back up the golf school. And she thought I was crazy. And she looked at it like I had 5 eyeballs. But anyways, but I lowered my handicap. When I walked away in 2016, my handicap at that time was a 2.4. After those 8 rounds, I go down to a plus 1.7. And that's how quickly it changed. And here we are. So it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, that's incredible. This the stories that are each so personal and emotionally charged from each of you. Like I love how you just bring that passion to truly give back, because it's been so impactful for each of your own respective journeys. Now, something that stood out to me and something I talk about a lot, like when, I do a lot of visualization discussion. Hypnosis has the component of visualization, but where a lot of people fall short is they fail to invoke all five senses. And I love how you hit on, you absolutely have to invoke all five senses. But something, Shannon, you said to me, and I'm just looking down at my notes here, is that at the end is this desired emotional state that you must cultivate. Speak a little more about that, especially for the listener here. Like, let's be frank, and this is a bias and a generalization, but most men, they hear the word emotion, they want to run the opposite direction here. But you're telling me we need to tap into creating this desirable emotional state. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean and how and why that's advantageous to locking yourself in the zone.
Right. So, several things. Number one, what happens when, let's talk high school football. I know this is like out of left field. High school football. What is it like in the locker room right before the game? What's going on? You might hear people, and all this, and then there's another guy who might be sitting down, like, what in the world am I getting into? And then other people, they're getting themselves pumped up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, with that being said, with that emotional state, okay, let's do this. With that kind of an emotional state, do you think that's going to affect with how they play? Right? Their level of focus is going to be higher, everything like that. So that's a prime example of what that was. And that I was the same way in soccer. I was one of those guys, don't talk to me right before a game. I'm like, and same thing in speed skating, like, no. I'm like this, for lack of a better word, like a monster. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like so locked in and so focused. Like, I don't want to have any kind of distraction. And if you're talking to me, you're distracting me, I'm going to walk away. Right? That's just my personality. But the thing is, though, that's the power of the emotional state that I'm talking about. So if we are training ourselves in that manner over and over again, for example, like with what the football players, but we're getting mental reps in. So think about it. You're applying that emotional state to a golf swing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And again, how long does it do a golf swing? At the most, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, maybe not even that, but you're applying that emotional state, but you're going in and out with your trigger with that emotional state. And you're doing that over and over and over and over, like at least 50 reps, because there's new research when it comes to mental imagery that came out of Stanford that says you at least have to have 50 reps, no longer than 20 seconds per rep. Okay. That's the perfect thing for golf. Obviously the swing, you know what I'm saying? And then you're doing that over and over again. So what do you think is going to happen when you get on the golf course, once you've got all those mental reps in, right? And Bo can explain a little bit different, because there's different types of emotional states you can put yourself into. Mine was like I was getting ready to get in a fight, but we know that's not going to work for putting. Right? You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying is let's tap into that and use it. And so then once we get out onto the golf course, for example, we've got all these mental reps in, we built it up. So then we're attaching that, and we do our trigger, we're attaching that emotional state to what happens, and we're going to be dialed in. And so Bo kind of explain what your mental state was.
Yeah, and Bo, real quick, Bo, I'm just curious before, maybe you can speak on this. I think it'll add context for the listener. Like what I'm hearing too is kind of an optimal state of arousal, focus, and performance that gets you, you're just aroused enough, or focus and arousal are high, where performance is going to be optimized, but it's not too far over the curve where arousal and performance begin to decline. Am I hearing correctly there? That emotional state gets you into that, obviously the zone, but the sweet spot where everything comes together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it gives some clarity here to what Shannon just spoke on. The CPR, which is the emotion state that we're applying to our mental reps, which we call it kinesthetic mental imagery. And, you really want to know more of the scientific reason behind it. It's because we're engaging all the senses, whereas just mental imagery is like daydreaming. You don't have all senses engaged. So to bring context to what Shannon just described, when we're doing our mental reps away from the course, we like to call it training the dog within you. And so what's happening is we are doing a physical trigger, then we're following that up simultaneously really quick together with the emotion into that situation. So for me personally, it was a bull seeing red. And other people, it might be just like a sniper's calm. And we do break these down in our book. Another could be just excitement. Another could just be like a linebacker tackling in a running back, And so what's happening is we're channeling that emotion toward our target. And that's the most critical piece in all this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be very mindful that when we're doing our CPR, when we're inserting the emotion, is that we're connecting it to our target. So then when we actually do go play and we just do our custom trigger only out on the course right before we're about to hit a shot, immediately we're going to start feeling that level of focus on our target. And so that's through the process of psychomuscular training. And that's kind of like the 10,000 foot view. Obviously, there's more details in that, but that's how we're bringing it all together. And that's how we're getting people into that state more often, which would be flow state.
Fantastic. So well said. And I just, I have so much relatability to this. I love the way you're breaking it down so simplistically. And it's something I try to talk about often, is that emotional state is so powerful because at our core, we are emotional beings. And so many people, especially beginners or those getting back into the game, you think emotion in golf, you think anger and frustration. I'm pissed off because I hit it out of bounds again. I keep slicing my drive. But there is a way to leverage these emotions to diffuse the ones that are toxic and counterproductive, and to create and generate on demand, like you're alluding to, the ones that actually serve you and help you to lock into the zone and play your best. So excellent descriptions there. Really, really love that. Now, on the topic of emotions, like when I first heard caveman golf, I loved the simplicity of it. I also took it as it is, in a way, emotionless golf. So knowing that we are emotional beings, talk me through some of the strategies you use to help golfers you work with combat some of the natural emotions of pressure, anxiety, stress, anger, and frustration on the course.
Man, it's such a great question. And this is where psychomuscular training has like no end in terms of, I love what Shannon says a lot. Your limitation is in your imagination, right? So when golfers go to the course, right, they can go to the course, they can practice hitting shots in the range. They could also work on, creating holes in the range and simulating playing a course on the range, right? They can also go to the short game area and they can hit all kinds of shots. They can play games. They can do a lot of putting games and putting drills and all that. So there's no like limitation to what people can practice, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You can also do very much the same thing when you're doing mental reps away from the course. And so one of the cool things about psychomuscular training and bringing in kinesthetic mental imagery is we can simulate a lot of these situations that people are struggling with, but then more importantly, having them overcome it. I'll give you a perfect example. One of our tour players won the Colorado Women's Open a few years ago. And it was so interesting because the day before and 2 days before, she was on the practice putting green and actually rehearsing making the winning putt, which would have been a downhill right to left, about a 20-foot putt. Well, isn't it interesting that on the final round, she hits it to a spot that's 21 feet, right to left, downhill. And granted, she did have a 2-shot lead at this point, but she ended up making the putt for birdie to actually win the event. And, this is where it's so interesting because you can simulate pressure, but you can also overcome that type of pressure because you're putting yourself in that situation over and over. So like when we have people that struggle with maybe first tee jitters, or we have people that just struggle with just anxiety going into a round, or maybe it's during the round. One, we do walk them through and showing them how to take that nervous energy and turn it into excitement. But also we can show them with mental reps away from the course where they have done it so many times over and over and over again that they feel like they've already been there. Shannon's good friends or in a mastermind group with Brian Kane and Zach Sorensen. And Zach Sorensen's the mental performance coach for Atlanta Braves, and one of the big reasons why they won the World Series a couple years ago. And Zach told a story one time where there was a AAA pitcher. He got called up to the major leagues, and he was going to be pitching like 2 days later. Well, when he got the call, like it was totally out of left field. He's a nervous wreck. So him and Zach are having a conversation, And he's like, man, I don't know. I'm like, I'm a nervous wreck. Like, I'm like so anxious going into this game. And so Zach said, all right, well, here's the list of all the batters. Here's, I think they maybe went through some video of how they swing and how they hit and all that. And so he had him pitch at every batter, mental reps. He also had him engage with the stadium, the fans, the noise, all of it. And so he's doing this over the next few days. And then he actually goes and pitched the game. Zach watched it at night and was like, wow, he pitched pretty good. And then he has a call the next day and he said, well, how do you feel? And he said, Zach, I felt like I had been there 100 times before I actually stepped foot on the mound. And so this is the power of kinesthetic mental imagery and what people can utilize it for.
Yep.
Shannon, anything to add?
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's what I call the mental alarm clock. We've got to have triggers in our place that actually becomes a mental alarm clock. And sometimes when I give the definition of stress or the definition of depression, it's very simple. And what I mean is this. Depression is someone that is obsessed with something that's in the past, right? Anxiety is someone that is obsessed with something that's in the future. However, optimal state of performance is someone that's obsessed with the now, right? So, and then this little quote, I love this. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. So, but have those mental alarm clocks in there of, like how are you reacting in certain situations, and then figure that out. So then you'll know because then it'll become a mental alarm clock, and then you'll be able to flush that out going into, whatever. It could be something simple as this. And journaling can play a huge role in this. And a lot of people don't even realize this. And honestly, it's not really talked about much in any sport, not just golf, but journaling your rounds, because then you can start seeing these negative habit loops that are going on. And so then once you start seeing those patterns, then you're like, okay, then that becomes that mental alarm clock. So then it's going off when you're in the round. Like, okay, I see this is what's happening. This is how I act in the past. I'm going to change that, and I'm going to start being focused on it and being focused on what's going on now.
I love that. So for the listener who's really beginning to resonate, understand and appreciate the value of this, and of course is going to get your book so they can learn all of the details of it. But the resistance that's coming to mind for them is like, okay, this sounds good. It looks good. How do I actually apply it away from the course? Like Bo, you mentioned like this work, a lot of this work's done away from the course, which in one end is a positive for that person struggling like me. I wish I could be on the course every day. That's just not my life right now. But I'm always looking for a way to gain an advantage, craft an edge, and improve my game, even if I can't get to the range. I know, because it's my background, that I can spend 5, 10, 15 minutes in going through some of what you're sharing. But for the listener out there, help them understand the simplicity and maybe what a routine away from the course looks like to get these mental reps in to improve their game.
Yeah, this is probably the best for last right here. So here's where I believe golf in the last 50 years has missed the mark. Unfortunately, we've been on this quest for searching for the perfect swing. Well, at the end of the day, it's not the swing that wins, it's the player that wins. And I can prove that because I've been inside the ropes, and I've been blessed to have some amazing coaches that I'm friends with. David Orr is my mentor. I've gotten to know Andy Plummer, Mike Bennett of Stack and Tilt, and Sean Foley. And so I've been inside the ropes with some of the best in the world. And I've seen guys that Monday qualified into an event, and they're outside the top 500, top 1,000 in world rankings, but yet they have better swings than the guys that are in the top 10. So what's the disconnect? Well, it's what I just shared. It's the player that wins. Well, here's the fascinating thing. When you look at the best players ever, right, like Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, Sam Snead, Ben Hogan, well, here's what's fascinating about some of those guys. When you look at Jack Nicklaus, who was his childhood coach? It was Jack Grout. Well, who was Jack Grout mentored by? Alex Morrison. Now, Sam Snead, Ben Hogan shared the same coach, Harvey Pinnock. Who was Harvey Pinnock's mentor? Alex Morrison. Now, Mickey Wright, one of the best ever on the LPGA side of things, her coach was Harry Pressler. who was Harry's mentor, Alex Morrison. Well, who in the world is this Alex Morrison guy? Well, come to find out, when you dig a little deeper, one, Harvey said he had one of the best swings he's ever seen. Two, Alex Morrison wrote a book called Better Golf Without Practice in 1940. Now, the fascinating thing about that book is that in one of the stories in it, it was really cool. He tells a story about this comedian, Lou Lore, that could not break 90, tried everything under the sun, and just was not getting success. Well, Alex sits him down for like 2 weeks, and they sit in a chair, and they're only doing mental reps, and they're rehearsing the 5 Morrison swing keys. So that's all they do for 2 weeks. Well, first round back, he shoots 87. Wait a minute, he didn't practice physically, he didn't do technique, and didn't do any of that? No, he just did mental reps only, and he goes out and shoots his best round ever. So Alex passes on this trait to these legends like Jack and Sam Snead and Ben Hogan. And how I know that about Ben Hogan is because Ben Hogan, in a 1947 New York Times article that I had found somehow 2 years ago when we were doing a bunch of research, he mentioned Alex Morrison's name in that New York Times article. And that was like the coolest thing I've ever seen, because like I really feel like, it's my own personal opinion, but that was like Ben's greatest secret. So here's the thing. Sam Snead, he hasn't been shy about this, because Bob Rotella writes about this in the Golfer's Mind book. And inside that book, and I'm going to get to the practical piece that everybody wants to know how to do this. But here's the thing that people need to understand about Sam Snead. He's tied with Tiger with all-time PGA Tour wins, one of the best ever. And he had a reputation for speaking his mind later on in his, later years of, his time here on Earth. And he is not shy on speaking his hard opinion on things. So Bob knows that this is a make or break moment in his career. And if Sam gets up and says, this guy is a crook, like, don't listen to him, we would never know Bob Rotella's name like we know him today, right? Well, Bob gets up, shares his presentation. Well, Sam does stand up. But what Sam says shocks everybody in the room. He said, we need to listen to this young man, because what he is talking about is one of the biggest keys to my success and why I was able to accomplish all that I did. He said, back in my prime, when I was, night before a round, I would visualize myself playing the perfect round, and I'd get through like hole 12, hole 15 or something like that, fall asleep, feel great the next morning, go through my normal routine, go out, play a great round. And I just kept doing that repeated process. So that's what he was doing. He did mental reps. But where did he learn that from? Goes back to Alex Morrison. So that's a starting point for most people, is they could just start out with their home course. And if you want to do just the absolute basics, I mean, this is what the Olympic athletes do. And Shannon knows that, because it was one of the first orientation videos, one of the first things they showed Shannon when he was out there in Colorado Springs. And he's got some funny story about that, running into Michael Phelps and not even know who Michael Phelps was. Right there, it's hilarious in and of itself.
Yeah, I thought it was
so funny. But I mean, Michael Phelps,
that's
really
Michael Phelps,
that and really
don't know it from high school, but anyway,
heavily when it came to just doing mental reps. So it's a skill that most people should implement and use, because the game's greatest use it. Those that might be kicking back on Tiger Woods. Well, Tiger in a 2001 clinic, and it's in his book too. Tiger's putting routine. He said, on final round days, when it looks like I'm calm on the outside, but I'm super nervous on the inside, Tiger said that. That's coming out of his mouth. He said, when I'm making some of these iconic putts, the reason why I'm able to do that is because I'm looking one time, and he described it like, those like Polaroid, like where you do like the, I don't know, point shoot camera type thing. And he said, I'd take a picture, bring my eyes back, look another time, I'll take a picture, set up to the ball, and then I'll take one final look and I'll take a picture. And then he said, all right, Tiger, putt to the picture, like Papa used to say. Well, guess what, guys? That's mental rep. That's mental imagery. So it is. It's pretty fascinating. And that's kind of the foundation piece to what we teach inside psychometric training. But, when you kind of look at it and you want to do it very simply, just start out with your home course, because you played it so many times. The image is very clear, all the details, it's easy to bring to mind. And then you just go through the process of doing your trigger, CPR, do your mental rep, and you just keep repeating that process all the way through. And then eventually you'll get so good that you can start inserting different distractions. You get to a place finally where you're like Shannon was when he was speed skating at the height of his career. He would walk down the mall and do mental reps with his eyes open and all the distractions, and then your muscles are twitching and firing. And people that might be arguing that piece right there, here's where I would challenge them, because in 1980, one of the pioneers that started this whole journey of like understanding kinesthetic mental imagery a little bit more was a study by Swinn, Suinn. You can go look this up. Really fascinating. It was a downhill skier. They hooked him up with the electrodes. I might butcher the scientific term, but I think it was EEG that they were using, or EKG. It doesn't matter. But what they found was when he ran the course physically, they noticed the muscle activity on the graph. But then after that, he knew all the turns and knew everything about the turns. And then he just sits completely still in a chair. And they said, all right, go race it again in your mind and stay physically still. Well, he does that, sits physically still to the naked eye. And on the graph, they're showing a even greater heightened level of muscle activity that's fired. So that's the power in it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to break this down. Let's give some homework, right? Like, where in the
please.
world do you start? What do I do? I'm on my course, but what am I doing on the course? And so I like to make it simple for a lot of our clients and stuff like that. And let's say Monday through Friday. All right. Monday is what? It's the first day of the week. Well, let's work on driver, right? Let's work on drivers on Monday, do mental reps, get that in. And then on Tuesday, let's do approach shots anywhere from 100 yards or further out, right? And then Wednesday, being hump day, let's work on specialty shots, all the hard shots, whatever it may be, right? Bunker shots, you got to, you're in the trees and you got to curve it out or do whatever, specialty shots, hump day. We're going to make it over that. Thursday, let's work on up and downs, right? We're coming back in. And then Friday being the last day, let's work on finishing. Well, let's work on putting, focus on putting. So then, I would say a lot of people that play, they're only able to play on the weekends or something like that. So then my suggestion is after the round, go back and fix your shots with mental imagery, because what happens is we start getting in a negative habit loop. Let me explain what I mean by this. We had one of our tour players. I was walking with her at Pinehurst, and she was playing, and we get up to this hole, and she hits it off way out into the rough and again in the trees and stuff like that. And then she ends up, almost, like double bogeying on that hole. And then the round, she still played well during the round, but that was just worse. That was pretty bad already. So she was actually 11 under at that time. And then at the end of the round, because of what happened, she was only 5 under. So she really, going backwards big time. But here's the thing. Again, this is why the importance of journaling. But I went back and we started discussing. So what's going on? What's happening? And come to find out, that same hole, she had done that. She had practice on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, right? And then playing on Thursday. Well, guess what? 4 or 5 times in a row, she hit the same exact shot. That's what I mean. And then I said, all right, so what I want you to do, I want you to go back and fix that shot. Go back and play the round like Sam Snead had done numerous times in the past. He would go replay the round, and he's playing the perfect round, fixing the shots and stuff like that. So with her, that's what I had her do. The next day, she went from 5 under to 12 under and she birdied that hole. So she broke herself out of that negative habit loop. And so that's the power of going back and doing a post-round analysis on top of that. But those are just some things that you can work on. Because here's the thing. As a speed skating coach, if I made up every single time I went to practice what we were doing, do you think the skaters would actually trust me as a coach? Right? Otherwise, we're getting junk miles, right? And so, and I also race bikes. And so I don't want to go out. You got to have purpose every single time. So what I just laid out gives you purpose in your training, right? But then let's don't neglect any part of your game. Notice I didn't, I went through pretty much all your clubs that are in the bag. And so we can't neglect any part of the game. And so that just kind of give you some little bit of guidelines and some things that you can work on going into the future when it comes to getting your mental reps in and going to the gym, your mental gym, so to speak, and working out.
Absolutely incredible. And to be frank, selfishly, I wish I could spend a couple days with each of you. I know that's fortunately why you have your summits and your online courses and opportunities to learn. Absolutely incredible. However, I know I need to be respectful of your time. So, Bo, Shannon, I will link all of your social and prioritize getting your book, which is absolutely fantastic. Everyone listening needs to get that book. But is there somewhere else you
Yeah, I mean,
recommend the
really, I
listener
think
visit or
when
go
you look at
continue to
the
learn
book
more from you
itself,
that you'd like to
right?
share here
You know,
this morning?
people obviously will naturally inquire, like, how can we work with you more intimately and things like that. And what we tell people is like, look, even if you can't work with us more intimately, that book is like us personally working with you on your game. So you can get that book at endthezone.secrets.com, or you can go to Amazon. If you're in an international country, you can get the book there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That book is called In the Zone Secrets, How to Get in the Zone at the Flip of a Switch. And I just want to echo everything they shared. Like sometimes, a lot of the resistance I run up to as a coach is like, it sounds too simple. It sounds almost like just woo woo in a way, like using the power of my mind. But from personal experience and obviously listening to Bo and Shannon, seeing all of their great work, please bring forth that open mind, because this is incredibly powerful. And if you're serious and you're committed to improving your game, this is a surefire, research-backed way to fast track your
Absolutely.
success. Bo, Shannon, thank you so much for joining me today and
Absolutely.
sharing
Thank
your
you.
wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for having us on. This is fun. Love it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And for those of you listening, thank you so much for listening. If you found today's episode valuable, share it with a fellow golfer. Go purchase Bo and Shannon's book. And if you feel called to, you continue to find this show valuable, take 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to today's episode. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.